so fantastic, and I just want to say, especially for these people on the floor, if you need to stand up and stretch, we will know that that's okay. You know, we've got to let women move. So welcome to the Women Writing About Their Lives panel. I'm so honored to be moderating this panel. I want to give a huge shout out to Amy Ferris. Thank you for putting this together. And I also want to say, I'm going to introduce everybody. We have a lot of time. 2 hours is fantastic. I mean, what a luxury.
2 hours.
So you're going to hear a lot, and we're going to have plenty of time for questions. But again, if you need to move, don't ask for permission. Just do it. And also, Amy and I did this panel together down in San Miguel de Allende a few times, and
Oh, wow.
she said, and that was in 2013, I think the first time we did this panel, and she said, I want to take this around the country and around the world. And so I just want to say this is the beginning of that dream. She's done this panel in other cities as well, and it's awesome to bring it here to Milford, so thank you. So I'm Brooke Warner, and I'm the publisher at She Writes Press, and I know Amy and others. Some of you know me from my time at Seal Press. I was at Seal Press for 8 years before I founded She Writes Press, and I have been doing She Writes Press for 5 years. And I'm not going to talk a lot about She Writes today. I'm going to talk about these amazing women. If you want to talk to me about She Writes Press or anything She Writes related, I'll hang out afterwards. I'm also doing a Q&A at the pop-up tent at 3:30. So if you're interested in publishing or writing, I'll make time this afternoon to talk to you. I would love that. Meanwhile, I have the great honor to be discussing women and writing and all things that are unique to women in writing. It was a while ago that I was talking to a black writer who said, you know, it's really interesting because when you're a black writer and you're writing black characters, black writers are for people of color, and white writers are for everyone. And I think the same is true for women. We can say, you know, the publishing industry seems to think that women writers and women protagonists are for women, and male protagonists are for everyone. So I think it's a good place to kick off because we're going to be talking about that today. Some of the problems inherent with being a woman writer, and some of the challenges we face, particularly in the publishing industry and other spaces, and so it's going to get difficult sometimes. You know, we want to have challenging conversations and talk about our struggles, but also certainly talk about our successes. So with that, I'm going to introduce everybody. Just read your bios, and then I want you all to answer this question, which is, I just want you to talk about your creative process to start. You know, like, tell everybody what kind of writing you're doing. If it's memoir, nonfiction, fiction, what kind of fiction, and then also just how do you delve into your characters? Talk as if it's a memoir, what is that like? And so I'd love to just hear from each and every one of you about process, and starting with the bios. Okay, so Linda. Everyone, I hope, can see us, sort of. Linda Schreier is an author, excuse me, I need a little more light, but I'll do the best I can. Linda Schreier is an author, television screenwriter, and writing teacher. She began her career as a music composer, studying music with Steve Reich and Philip Glass. She composed film scores and television commercials and was nominated for a few Clios. Most notably, When the Heat Hits the Streets, Laura Branigan, thank you, for Chrysler. Sorry, I know, that's totally true. In the 80s, her career as a writer shifted to words instead of music, and she has been nominated for a Writers Guild Award and received both a Christopher Award and an Ollie Award. In 2004, she traveled to Moscow for Sony Pictures Television International to teach screenwriting, and her most recent novel, Tears and Tequila, has been optioned as a television series. All right, so creative process.
My creative process. Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So, as you can tell from that bio, my creative process might be all over the place because I've penetrated so many different careers without meaning to and had to make it up as I went along. So I would say that my creative process begins with a lot of chaos. You know, I don't know exactly what I'm searching for. I don't know exactly what I want to find, but I'm willing to jump in and see if I can find it. And when I was writing music, it was a little easier because the structure of music is so strict that once I found a certain line or a certain phrase, I could just keep following that to the end. But writing is so open-ended that I find it much more difficult. I write novels. I'm on my second novel, and as I say, I procrastinate my way into the novel. You know, very confused, doing a lot of research, waiting to hear the character's voice in my head, waiting until it comes. So I guess the thing that I've learned is to trust the process, because I've been doing this for a long time in different forms. And at this point, I do trust it, I hope.
Okay, cool. We're going to be passing the mic back to me to do the intros, and then we'll move into broad questions. Kitty Sheehan is a former elementary teacher, corporate trainer, consignment store owner, and graphic designer. A native Iowan and graduate of the University of Iowa, Kitty founded and directs the Dartbrook Writers Retreat. A freelance copywriter, she is also a social media expert and consultant for several brands. She's participated in several panel discussions on social media trends. Kitty's essay, Irish Wake-Up Call, was published in the anthology Shades of Blue, edited by Amy Ferris. And she's the editorial director for the annual Woodstock Book Fest in Woodstock, New York, and a regular workshop teacher at the event. She is a past contributor to the Hudson Valley magazine, so thanks and welcome. Tell us about your creative process, please.
Thank you, everybody. This has just been a wonderful, wonderful time. I don't know why it says a social media expert on there, because there's no such thing as that. If I wrote that, there was something really bad happening to me that day. Yeah. Much like Linda, as you can see, my resume is kind of all over the place. And I left teaching knowing that somehow I was going to be a writer, and my first writing job was at a spice company in Iowa, Frontier Natural Products. I wrote their spice labels and named Acacia essential oils and all kinds of things for them. So that's when I first started to feel like a real writer. And it went from there. I just grew into it, found other things to write, found people that were supportive, and ended up moving to the Hudson Valley, where it's just been a very, very supportive community. I'm a copywriter and an editor. So, you know, I was telling, maybe it was Linda, I was saying last night, if you want me to write about caskets, I'll be a casket expert. As I just said.
So now we know why expert showed up in the bio. Expert for the day. I'm always saying own it, right? I mean, you guys are all experts, so we got to use that more often. Okay, Corey Skolnick is the author of 2 novels, America's Most Eligible and Orphan. She has contributed to numerous anthologies and is a featured author on David Corr's podcast, Thrills and Mysteries. She's an honorable mention recipient in the short story category from the Oregon Writers Colony, and she's been published in magazines and literary works. Her novel, Orphaned, has been optioned and is being developed as a feature film by Ron Shelton of Bull Durham fame. Is that an old bio, too?
It's all bullshit.
If you have taken a picture of me with this between my legs, please delete it. Nobody else is doing it. Okay, I'm going to say this. Amy's going to give me shit for it later, but I'm not a real writer. And now I'm going to freak everybody. Okay. I'm going to freak everybody out because what I really am is a shrink. And I worked for over 20 years as a psychotherapist in private practice in Los Angeles and a psychology professor at Cal State University Northridge. So in my identity, my heart, I'm a shrink. I'm not a writer, I'm an imposter. When I walk around saying I'm a writer, I'm not really a writer. And I know that's probably not a fun thought for all of you, that your shrink is someday going to write. So on behalf of the American Psychological Association, I apologize for that. But I will say my creative process is equally chaotic and equally crazy. And what I have discovered, though, is if I get a deadline, I can produce. So I need to, even if it's like just some arbitrary deadline that I've assigned myself, I'll knock it out. And if I don't have a deadline, woo, years go by. Years go by. And so, deadlines. That's my creative process.
Okay, we're already getting into heavy confessions. We'll be circling back around to that later. Everyone knows I highly disapprove of that statement. I am not a writer. Okay, Heather Summerhays Carriou is the author of 65 Roses, a sister's memoir. She was born in Canada and holds a BFA in theater performance and recently earned a Master of Science degree in narrative medicine from Columbia University, where she is now working on a fellowship. Heather spent 15 years as a professional actor on stages across Canada and off-Broadway before turning to full-time writing. And she told me before we started that this book is ancient history, and so I will be looking forward to hearing what is modern history. Okay. Welcome. Tell us about your creative
Thanks.
process.
I feel like a fairy godmother got me here somehow. It's been a while since I've done this sort of thing, and it's wonderful to be here. I always wrote since I was a kid. It was a coping mechanism, I think, more than anything, and I never thought it was a big deal. I thought everybody did it. So the idea of becoming a writer never occurred to me. I became an actor. I wrote a lot of poetry. I started writing in grade 5 when we studied poetry. Poetry is still it's at the heart of my process. A lot of my prose pieces begin as a poem. I prompt myself with poems or with lines from poems. A lot of my process involves laying down on the floor and wailing and crying for 2 hours and then getting back up and finishing the sentence. That's certainly how I wrote 65 Roses. When I started writing 65 Roses, I didn't know how to write in the conventional sense. My first efforts were like grade 12 essays. So what I did since I was coming out of acting is, again, as part of my process, and this has remained, I took everything I knew about acting, like intention and behavior and sense and effective memory, and I started using those things as I knew them and applied them to my storytelling. I won't say I'm not a writer. I am a writer, but what I am wholly, I believe, is an ethnographer. My practice is one of ethnography, and that takes me into all kinds of genres: fiction, poetry, memoir, life writing, you name it. And anybody who knows me, watches me, I walk around, I'm just constantly taking notes. I'm taking notes on everything. I'm writing everything down because that's ethnography, and that's part of my process too. I just write everything down. Careful what you say. You might end up in my novel.
That is a good practice. Thank you for that. Angela M. Giles' work appears online at The Nervous Breakdown, Literary Mothers, Medium, Human Parts, as well as other journals. She has been featured in print at The Healing Muse and is also a contributor to Shades of Blue. Angela is also an editor at The Manifestation. Angela prides herself on being exactly who she is, an accidental warrior working to make grace and kindness sexy again. Nice. Her full-time passion is her son, who is proof that her heart exists outside of her body. Angela lives in Massachusetts, where she conquers the world one day at a time.
My process is chaotic as well, and I'm wondering if that's because we're women. We kind of have everything to do for people, but I work full-time. Until September, my son was at home. Now he's at boarding school, so that's been a weird adjustment. I like to write. I've always got a pen and a notebook, and I've got a pen fetish and a notebook fetish and far more pens than I will ever use. And I hope one day to fill all the notebooks in my house. But my process really just involves experiencing the world and seeing how I feel about it. When I am writing, some of my writing tends to be a bit of a downer, so I try to make sure that I am really shining it to find the exquisiteness in the pain. If I can't write, which I've not been able to, I blew my life up this year, so it's been a bit of a rough year. I read like a motherfucker. I read everything I can get my hands on. I just keep the words going through my brain. I take notes on what I read. I underline passages, and then when I find that things can get quiet or things touch me, I can go back, and at least my mind has had that constant exercise with words. My day job is in finance, so I don't get a lot of word exercise. But it's that. So I would say that if anyone is struggling with getting pen to paper, make sure you get your butt on the couch at least and read for 15 minutes a day. If you can't write 15 minutes a day, commit yourself to being around words, immersed in them in some way, 15 minutes a day.
Good advice. Okay. Ellen Meister is the author of 5 novels, including Dorothy Parker Drank Here, Farewell Dorothy Parker, The Other Life, and The Smart One. Her Parker books have been optioned by HBO for a series. Her nonfiction has been published in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Writer's Digest, Daily Beast, and Huffington Post. And she teaches creative writing at Hofstra University. Welcome, Ellen.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you. So as not to be a total fraud, there's just a little bit of a lie there. No, just a mistake. My Dorothy Parker books were not optioned. My book, The Other Life, was actually optioned by Terrence Winter for HBO. They're not picked up. I know, very sad. But I had a very exciting year when I was thinking about it. So my process involves, and like Brooke was saying, I do teach creative writing. So can you guys hear me? If this mic is a little weird. Okay. So one of the things I tell my creative writing students is that a big part of a writer's job is to pay attention. So we pay attention both to the external world and our own internal world. And the external world is where we find those gorgeous little details that go into our books and just add some authenticity and some verisimilitude. So that's what we're doing. We're always noticing all this little crap, and also looking at the external world. That sometimes something happens. Like the other day, my husband were watching some movie, and he kept referring to Zach Galifianakis as Gus Galifianakis. So I said, oh my God, that is just freaking hilarious. I think one day I'm going to have a character who refers to all famous people using the wrong first name. I think that would be a pisser. So this is what I mean, just paying attention and getting little things that you say, that might really work. And then the other thing is paying attention to what's inside, which are those sort of weird thoughts that flit through everybody's mind. And the writer's job is to sort of stop that crazy little flit of a thought and go, wait a minute, could that be a book? Is that interesting? Is that an idea? And we kind of do that all day long, and some of those little things that we stop and look at just keep coming back and coming back and coming back, and that's when we go, wait a second, I think that might be a book. So that's part of the process. And the other part of the process, like Corey was saying about deadlines, so if I don't have an external deadline, I tend to do self-imposed deadlines, and I, make sure whether I have feeling inspired or not, my ass is in the chair in front of the computer, and I'm absolutely writing. And one of the things I say to people that when they say, well, what do you do about writer's block? I'm going to very, very badly paraphrase something that the artist Chuck Close, the portrait artist Chuck Close once said, something to the effect of, inspiration is for amateurs, the rest of us like put our ass in the seat and get to work. And I think that, that's a lot of what it is for a writer. It's just making sure that you show up, that you're there, that you carve out the time, and that if you don't have a deadline, you self-impose one, because otherwise you can just, trust me, I procrastinated for decades and decades and decades before I started this career I always wanted to do. So otherwise it's just too easy to procrastinate and not get it done. So that's my process.
Thank you. Yeah, I always say it's like it's not about talent, right? It's about showing up and doing the work. So there you go. Okay, Barbara DeVries is the author of Stupid Model, a memoir of her days as a young model in Paris in Australia. She is the co-founder of G DeVie Studio, a small bespoke imprint that she started with her husband, author Alistair Gordon, in 2009. As a designer and publisher, she has created numerous books. I'm not going to say all the titles, but it is amazing. Your website is also amazing. As a plastic pollution activist, Barbara was featured in the Sundance movie One Beach and has done a TED Talk on ocean pollution. Check it out. I watched it last night. Super interesting. And the recipient of the 2015 Dutch American Heritage Award. She's working on a book of her days in the early 90s as director of design at CK Calvin Klein, a memoir that focuses on the women behind Calvin's back. Whoa.
Thank you everyone for being here. How fabulous. Who would have thought that when I sat here watching jazz on a Thursday night that I would be sitting here talking about being a writer. Wow. Heather, what I was thinking, and I don't know who said it, but someone said that writing is acting on paper, which I think is such a wonderful way to express it. Anyway, my process kind of happens in between everything else because I have 3 daughters. We live in Milford and we live in Miami. We just evacuated. And I have this business with my husband. So writing for me is something that I need to find the time for, and I have written, I think, about 12,000 words of my Calvin Klein book in the dog park with my dog. Because it's the only place where nobody knows I'm there. I take the kids to school, I get to the dog park by 7:30, and I stay for as long as I can stand the mosquitoes and the gnats. And the dog is white. If he gets really black, I also go home. So I've managed to get 12,000 words out so far on the Calvin Klein book. What motivates me is often personal experiences that I feel are perceived in the wrong way, and I want to show the world what it's really like. So my modeling book was very much about the perspective of being on the other side of the camera, being on the other side of glamour, being on the other side of the demands our society places on beauty for women and how we look, and that if you are perceived as a model, being a certain way, that doesn't necessarily mean you feel that way. So that's one aspect. The Calvin Klein book is very much motivated by the fact that Calvin gets all the credit and everybody behind the scenes is a woman, and those women need the credit, and I'm going to give it to them.
Awesome. Can't wait for that. Okay, so now we're going to jump around a little bit. I'm not just going to keep going in order, and I do have one question for everyone and then some broad questions.